We have with us one of the world's leading experts on energy. For 20 years, Jeff Rubin was the chief economist at CIBC World Markets. In the mid-2000s, he accurately predicted a rapid rise in oil prices, and his new book, The Carbon Bubble, What Happens to Us When It Bursts, has yet more predictions for what happens to the Canadian economy when the realities of fossil fuel use become even more evident than they are today. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Jeff Rubin.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by talking about bubbles. You might remember when you were a kid, take a plastic wand, dip it in some dishwasher detergent, and then make these glistening, effervescent balls that would float up in your backyard and caught in the sunlight. And then just as quickly as they came, poof, they disappear, never to be seen again. Well, bubbles aren't just something that little kids do in their backyards with soap detergent and plastic wands. Bubbles are a common, very common, more common than most people recognize, feature of our economy. And they've always been that for centuries. 15th century Dutch tulip bulb bubble, next century the South Sea bubble. In my tenure as the chief economist at CIBC, I've known three bubbles. Around the turn of the century, we had the dot-com bubble, where all of a sudden stocks like Nortel Networks that were 35% of the value of the TSX disappeared in literally a year, became nothing. Then we had 4 or 5 years later the subprime mortgage bubble that blew up financial institutions all around the world. The financial institution that I was the chief economist of wrote down some $7 billion, others much worse. And now, I believe, another bubble, the carbon bubble. And the one common feature of all of these bubbles is that they're based on some fundamental premise that turns out to be untrue. In the case of the dot-com bubble at the turn of the millennium, it was that, there would be exponential growth in IT sales and that stock valuations of IT companies could be assigned infinite multiples on earnings because these companies were going to grow so exponentially. In the case of the subprime mortgage bubble, it was mortgages held by unemployed households could be deemed as creditworthy by rating agencies as a government of Canada or U.S. Treasury bond. And in the case of the carbon bubble, it's the notion that there is no limit to how much fossil fuels we can combust to drive economic growth. And right now, if you look at the global economy, about 75 to 80% of all the energy used to drive the global economy comes from either burning coal, burning oil, or burning natural gas. Well, there are two fundamental mistakes about the assumption that there is no limit to how much fossil fuel we can combust to drive economic growth. One is an economic limit, another is an environmental limit that in turn has dire economic implications.